Combining flash photography with long exposures can make for some really wild and dynamic photographs. So today we're in the studio, we've got a really cool model, simple setup, one flash unit and 2 RGB panel lights, and we're gonna get a really cool photo out of it. So I'm glad you're here. This is the Neewer Academy. Hey everyone, so we're here today with Ishkaday, who is a fire dancer and performance artist, and she's very kindly agreed to be our subject for our long exposure flash combo. What we're going to be doing is composing a photograph, in this case a portrait, hitting it with a flash to kind of lock that exposure into our frame, and then we leave the shutter open where Ish is going to perform like a flourish, and we're going to light that with some of our ambient light and get these really cool flowing motions in that same exposure. So it's a really fun thing to be doing, and the first thing we're going to start with is composing our shot and setting up our ambient light. So one of the most important things I think with capturing nice fluid motion of a subject is keeping your camera on a tripod. So if you're trying to hand hold this, you're going to get that jittery kind of camera shake. We don't want that. We want the camera to be perfectly still, and we want the subject to kind of paint with their motion. So I've got my main camera on a tripod right here, and we've been kind of looking at this, Ish and I off camera, about what could be like a cool exposure. And we like kind of posing to the left side of the frame and then letting her motion come into the right side. So go ahead and take your spot. So we can see in our main camera there, if we compose her over to the left side of that frame, then it leaves all this area here for her to move into with her motion. So this kind of shot is where we're going to hit the flash, and then we're going to let our ambient light color the rest of it. And so that's our frame, that's our composition. You can relax. And now we need to get our light going for that ambient light. So what I've got for our ambient light is 2 of these RGB 1200s. These are RGB panel lights. And we're going to use these, well here, I'll just turn one on. So I've got it set right now to the color mode. We've got one light here for our ambient light. I think we'll kind of make it like a side light. The other light I'm going to set up, I'm going to make sure this one is going to hit her from back here. And now, if you hold one of your fans up, now that light is going to be glowing from the back, and it's really going to paint in a very cool way when we have our long exposure. So once I get my lights set up to where I want them, I can take a meter reading, just look at my camera, and what we want to do is have a long exposure. So, quarter second, half second, that's not going to cut it. We want something like at least 1 or 2 seconds long. So we're going to dial our ISO down to like 200. Our aperture is going to be a 22. So tiny little aperture, very slow ISO, and that's going to give us that long exposure. For this one, it's going to be 2 seconds. So in order to get this, we're going to turn off our key light. So that's the light that we're using right now to light ourselves. So I'm going to turn it off, and it's going to get kind of dark in here. And now you can see this is the light that we're just going to be using for our ambient exposure. So right here is where our frame is going to start, and then it gives us all this room, and this is where our ambient light is hitting to get really cool effects. So let's go ahead and shoot a couple of those. And action. Perfect. All right, so now that we've got our ambient exposure done, and it turned out really, really cool, we got all that great motion, now we're going to sort of do the second part where we're going to compose for our portrait. I've turned our ambient lights off just so they're not interfering with any of our readings. And I'm using the new Q4 flash. I've got a softbox on it with a honeycomb. And the honeycomb is going to give me a nice direct kind of movement of that light. And that softbox is going to give us that nice kind of soft lighting. So our light is set up over here, but it's not really in the best position. So I'm going to position this to keep it off my background, but keep it on Ish's face. And I think that's really nice. So the light is actually kind of pointing at me right now. So she's just catching the edge of this light, but it's giving that nice drama and those nice shadows. So I think that light looks really nice. So I'm holding one of these little Q4 triggers. This is going to be mounted to the hot shoe on my camera. And I've also got my light meter. So I'm just going to take a couple readings. Remember, our aperture for our final exposure is f/22. So I just want this to be exposed. I'm not trying to go above or underexpose it. So I just want to hit a 22 with my meter. I'm going to start out at, let's just start out here at 16th power, and let's see where we are. All right, so I'm only at an f8 right now, so I need to power this guy up. So half power ought to do it. Let's just check. All right, 22, right on the nose. So half power, that landed exactly where we needed to be to expose Ish. I want to do a couple test exposures just to make sure that that's composed well, that the light's falling where I want it to fall. So I'm going to go behind the camera, attach my Q Pro, and shoot a couple portraits. So if you want to get to 1, we'll go ahead and shoot a couple. Now remember, that composition looks a little empty because we're going to fill everything in now with our long exposure and our ambient light. So we've got all the pieces in play. Now we can just turn our ambient lights on, modeling light goes off, and we can shoot our final shots and see what we get. Cool? All right, let's do it. So that's it, 2 continuous lights, 1 flash unit, and we got a really cool photo. Having a great model for this helps. Anything that's kind of flowing or moving, dancers are great, performance artists, athletes, I've seen some really cool photos done with athletes. So when you're planning your next portrait, think about this technique, think about how much fun it is, and really how simple it was to pull off. And thank you so much for being here. We'll see you in the next video.